My dear brothers and sisters in faith, Laylatul Qadr Mubarak. Tonight, as we commemorate and celebrate the birthday of the Quran, I'd like to speak of the all-encompassing power that the Quran bestowed on the community that lived with the Prophet and immediately after his demise, as also through the past 14 centuries. The Quran itself, as we know, has been subject to multiple and highly diverse interpretations over the centuries. These interpretations played a role in the Prophet's succession, which later led to the split between the Shia and the Sunni communities of diverse interpretations. One person who relied on the Quran to counter the injustice that was done to her was Hazarat Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, alayha salam. We have heard twice already about the anecdote surrounding the tasbih of Bibi Fatima and its meaning. However, today, I'd like to share with you a different and not the happiest of slices in Bibi Fatima's life following her father, our Prophet alayhi salam's death. As we know, a small group of Muslims gathered together at a place in Medina called Sa'ad Bani Saqifa and declared Abu Bakr as the successor to the Prophet, whilst Imam Ali and his family were busy giving the final burial bath, ghusl, to the deceased body of the Prophet. Subsequent to the Prophet's burial, Bibi Fatima went to Abu Bakr to demand that he release to her the share of her inheritance of the highly fertile lands of Fadak that her father had left her as inheritance, being the only surviving child of the Prophet. The Prophet had taken this action prompted by the revelation of the Quranic verse, which spoke about the inheritance rights and proportionate distribution amongst the immediate and distant members of a Muslim's family. At first, Abu Bakr asked Bibi Fatima to produce two witnesses who were present at the time when her father gifted her this property. So she brought forth the witnesses, but Abu Bakr rejected their testimony. Then he sent her the message that the Prophet had supposedly mentioned to someone at some point that, in quotes, prophets do not leave behind inheritance. All their properties become sadaqah, that is charity, to be used for the welfare of the community. This upset Hazrat Fatima even further during a time, a difficult time, when she was already grieving her father's death, with whom she was very close. She was also furious at being deprived of her basic right of inheritance, which for her was a gross injustice and also against the teachings of the Quran. So she did not give up. She walked over from her home straight into the mosque of Medina, accompanied by other women, to where Abu Bakr was seated with several of his companions. From her determined walk and gait, which we know resembled that of the Prophet, everyone immediately sensed the seriousness of her mission. She took her place behind a curtain and delivered a powerful indictment as a sermon, which is one of the most preserved of sermons from early Islam. Men and women who have been unjustly treated have found deep comfort and empowerment over the past 1400 years from this sermon. She declared that denying her the right to inherit would mean that they had gone back to the period of the Jahiliyyah, that is, the period of ignorance, which preceded, as we know, the coming of Islam, when women were treated as property and not as persons. Then, in a straightforward manner, she questioned Abu Bakr's interpretation of the Quranic verses, asserting her own interpretive authority as a result of her extremely close connection to and training from her father, our Prophet. She rhetorically and sarcastically asked whether God had sent a different revelation with regards to the rules of inheritance to Abu Bakr from that which God had sent to her father, whether the ones that her father had received were applicable to everyone except to his own family? If that were the case indeed, she demanded to see them and not just accept it from hearsay. Then she countered the reasoning that Abu Bakr had publicly given her for not releasing her inheritance by quoting several verses of the Quran, which confirmed that several prophets had inherited, like Hazrat Sulaiman had inherited from Hazrat Dawood, and that Hazrat Zakaria had prayed for a child who would inherit from him and from his ancestor Hazrat Yaqub, peace be upon all of them. In addition, she quoted verses from several surahs such as Al-Anfal, An-Nisa, Al-Baqarah, which all speak about the inheritance rights of the children in great detail. She then asked Abu Bakr if his daughter would inherit from him, to which he replied, yes. Thus she demonstrated to everyone present the flaw not only in the logic of his argument, but also the duplicity in his applying the Quranic precepts selectively. Thus she spoke with a great deal of certainty of faith and rational understanding, standing up courageously to the powers to be, even when she knew that it might not get her the desired result, and it did not. Even though she was a devoted wife, she did not wait for her husband, Imam Ali alayhi salam, to accompany her or fight on her behalf. She lived by her father's taught and lived principles to stand up for injustice, whether it was directed at someone else or at one's own self. Then she reminded the oppressors and the ones that had enabled them about the stern warning that the Quran had issued regarding the painful fate in the year after of the unjust and the oppressors unless they changed their ways before dying. By standing up for herself and for the people who earned their daily livelihood by working in the oasis of Fadak, she mirrored the very principles that her dear father, our Prophet, had adhered to, never caving in to any form of injustice. In addition, always ensuring that he acted justly towards others. This is a long and powerful sermon that I encourage you to read. By the way, this is the same female who had the title of a Zahra, the Radiant, who her father lovingly referred to as Abiha, the mother of her father, due to her loving care and love for him and supporting him after her mother Bibi Khadija's death. She also had the rare distinction of being called A'imma, the mother of Imams, and the leader of the women of paradise and of the world, Sayyida Nafisa al-Jannah and al-Alameen, or as we know her in our language by her title, Khatun-e-Jannat. Of course, we all recall that our own Imams, when they gained worldly power in North Africa in 909, chose to call their dynasty the Fatimid as a direct reflection of their aspiration to fight for justice and stamp out injustice, just as their grandmother Hazrat Fatima had done during her life on earth. Well, as we say in English, like mother, like daughter. Bibi Fatima and Imam Ali's daughter, Bibi Zainub, played a similar role fighting with her body and her words for the rights of the Ahl al-Bayt and the ideals that her entire family had lived and died for. During the Battle of Karbala and the massacre that ensued, Bibi Zainub protected and nursed from ill health her nephew, the son of her brother Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the young and only surviving male member of the Prophet's family, Ali, whom we know as Imam Zain al-Abidin. Subsequently, when the now defeated surviving members of the Prophet's family were brought to Damascus as prisoners to the court of Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, Bibi Zainub delivered a scathing rebuke to him as he showed off his victory and power by the highly irreverent act of playing with the dead head of her brother, Imam Hussein. Imagine her courage as she spoke fearlessly to the powers to be in his royal court with all his army and security present, while she and her surviving family members were shackled in chains. We can hear her deep faith, pride, knowledge of the Quran, the ideals of Islam, and much more in this brief excerpt that I quote here. She said, "O Yazid, do you think that we have become humble and despicable owing to the martyrdom of our people and our own captivity? As you have blocked all the paths for us, and we have been made captives, and we are being taken from one place to another, do you think that Allah has taken away His blessings from us? Do you think that by killing the godly persons, you have become great and respectable, and the Almighty looks at you with special grace and kindness?" She continued, in quotes, "For this reason and on account of this incorrect thinking, you have become elated and arrogant. You have become boastful because you have seen that the matters have taken a turn in your favor. You have, however, forgotten what Allah says, in quote, 'The disbelievers must not think that our respite is for their good. We only give them time to let them increase their sins. For them there will be a humiliating torment.' Surah Al-Imran 178. Then she reminded Yazid that unlike his shameful and unjust actions, when her own grandfather, the Prophet of Islam, conquered Mecca, he granted general amnesty to the life and property of all Meccans, amongst whom were Yazid's own father Muawiyah and his grandfather Abu Sufyan and his wife. Thus, she reminded Yazid that he actually owed his life to her grandfather's righteous actions and generosity, and this is how he was paying his act of kindness. Finally, I'd like to speak about Sayyida Nafisa's many noteworthy accomplishments. However, since we don't have much time today, I will share a brief biographical details of this great-great-granddaughter of Hazrat Hassan, the son of Imam Ali and Bibi Fatima, peace and blessings be upon all of them. She was born in Mecca about 80 years after the tragedy of Karbala. Subsequent to her marriage to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq's son, she moved to Egypt, where her reputation as a scholar of the Quran and Hadith was well established, in addition to her charitable work from her considerable wealth. She was so well known that none other than the famous Shafi'i, the man behind the establishment of one of the 4 schools of Sunni law, the Shafi'ite school, followed her to Egypt to study with her. And you might recall the other 2 individuals, Abu Hanifa and Malik, who were considered to be the founders of the Hanafi and Maliki schools of Sunni law, were students of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. Shafi'i studied with Sayyida Nafisa for a long time, whilst she financed his entire education. When he felt his end nearing, he immediately wrote his will, expressing his wish that he would respectfully request Sayyida Nafisa to recite his funeral prayers. So after his death, his body was carried to her home, where she recited his funeral prayers. Both Sayyida Nafisa and Sayyida Zainab's tomb shrines, as also Imam Hussein's mosque, which houses his head that the Fatimids brought back from Damascus, are highly frequented and revered places of worship and supplication today in the city of Cairo, right across from Al-Azhar Mosque and not far from the Al-Azhar Park, which, by the way, pay a reverent nod to Bibi Fatima's title as Zahra. It is worthwhile remembering that the population of Egypt is almost entirely of Sunni persuasion. But whoever visits these mosque shrines, as I have done on multiple occasions, I testify, and people will testify to its vibrant and dynamic religious life, where believers come daily to seek comfort and ask for blessings of the Ahl al-Bayt, to alleviate their difficulties. The contributions of these blessed women in the field of devotional practices are well known and widely recognized as exemplified by the tasbih of Bibi Fatima that has been referenced and that we recite regularly. Now, the academic study of religions underscores the role that women in society generally, and particularly within faith traditions, play in the practice of the faith. These studies point to the robust continuation of devotional practices and specific rituals within homes and in family congregations, and they credit it to the women. The Islamic tradition, like the Jewish tradition, also bears out the greater contribution of women in the sphere of practice of faith. Some social anthropologists, however, have identified this phenomenon as that of the heart, but have also characterized it as the soft religion, by which is sometimes meant not intellectual or rational enough, sometimes harboring superstition to a smaller or greater extent. This soft religion is then contrasted with the hard or tough religion, the religion of the head, the intellect, the rational self, and its much stronger association with men rather than women. As we have seen, even a cursory examination of the lives of these women from the Prophet's family and scores others demonstrates that not only were they highly devoted practitioners of the faith, but also equally strong proponents of its core values to be expressed justly within the public domains. This is not soft religion by any stretch of the imagination. The three female examples that have become role models for the larger Muslim Ummah, and particularly for the Shias, are from relatively early times when many personal and communal disagreements came to the fore and sometimes ended up in large-scale violence and death, as was the case at the Battle of Karbala. I definitely do not wish to reopen all historical wounds that have the potential of sowing ill feelings and discord within the larger Muslim Ummah. Indeed, thanks to the continuing guidance of each of our Imams, we as Shia Ismailis have been incredibly fortunate in extricating ourselves from the shackles of historical injustices and memories, because our Imams, including the Imam of our time, have always guided us to move forward and not let historical injustices hold our future as a pawn. Nevertheless, lessons from history can be significant in charting out future course of personal and communal actions, so long as we guard against attitudes of victimhood, arrogance, nostalgia, idealizing and romanticizing the past, because these attitudes can surely creep up on us unawares, such that we might start living in the past. And unfortunately, we witness it in many religious and political communities in our times as well. Nevertheless, lessons of history are invaluable. For example, in this COVID year of the pandemic, we all feel a bit disoriented since our regular rhythms of lives have been fundamentally disrupted. As I looked at the lives of Bibi Fatima and Bibi Zainub, I was forced to ask the question, how much more were their lives disrupted? They lost everything in a matter of minutes. In addition to their entire families, especially male members, being wiped out on battlefields. Yet, these women stood strong and tall against all odds, never losing sight of the fundamental purpose of their material and spiritual lives and their personal agencies. They used their head and their heart in fighting for what is right and just. They stood up for the ideals of Islam, irrespective of their gender or political fortunes at that time. They spoke up and made sure that their voices were heard when they noticed that the basic ideals that the Quran espoused were being violated or suppressed due to political and social gains. Their voices sometimes may have fallen on some deaf or arrogant ears. However, history did preserve their voices for us so that we can shake our own conscience to discover what is the core we stand for. What better way to celebrate their courage and inspiration than to commemorate them by thanking and praying for them on this blessed night. Ya Ali Madad.